In Missouri, ancient mysteries are carved into stone and raised in earth. Petroglyph sites such as Washington State Park Petroglyph Site preserve powerful symbols left by native peoples centuries ago. These carvings may represent spiritual beliefs, celestial events, or tribal stories, offering a rare glimpse into indigenous worldviews. Beyond the rock art, Missouri was once home to thriving mound building societies connected to the great Mississippian world. While Cahokia Mound stands as the most famous example nearby, Missouri itself held ceremonial centers that have largely disappeared beneath modern landscapes. One of the most impressive related earthworks is Emerald Mound, a massive platform mound likely used for ritual and leadership gatherings. Together, these sites reveal a sophisticated network of ancient communities whose spiritual traditions, engineering skill, and cultural influence shaped the region long before European settlement. Missouri petroglyph meanings. What if I told you that carved into solid rock in Missouri are messages left by people who lived hundreds, maybe even 1,000 years ago, and we still don't fully understand what they were trying to say? Deep inside Washington State Park in eastern Missouri, there's a sandstone wall covered with ancient carvings. This place is known today as the Petroglyph Site. At first glance, it doesn't look dramatic. It's just a rocky surface along a quiet trail. Trees surround it. Birds call from the woods. But step closer, and you begin to see shapes cut into the stone. Birds with spread wings, human-like figures, strange symbols, and patterns that don't match modern writing. These carvings were likely made by Native American people connected to the Mississippian culture around 900 to 1500 years ago. That's the same cultural world linked to Cahokia across the river. The people who carved these images had no written alphabet like we use today. So these images were their language, their memory, their story. And here's the mystery. We don't know exactly what they mean. Some of the carvings clearly show birds. One large image looks like a bird with wings stretched wide. Many researchers believe it represents a falcon or hawk. In Mississippian culture, birds were powerful symbols. They were linked to the sky, to spirits, and to upper worlds. So maybe this wasn't just a bird. Maybe it stood for something bigger, like protection, power, or a connection to the spirit world. There are also human-like figures. Some look simple, almost like stick figures. Others appear more detailed. Were they leaders, shamans, warriors? Or maybe they weren't individuals at all. They could represent ideas, life, death, strength, balance. One of the most debated carvings is sometimes called the Thunderbird. In many native traditions, the Thunderbird is a powerful sky being that controls storms. But here's the catch. The name Thunderbird comes from later recorded tribal stories. We can't be fully sure that's what the carvers meant at the time. It's possible. It makes sense culturally, but it's not proven. That's the challenge with petroglyphs. We are looking at symbols without having the full key to decode them. Some researchers think the carvings mark a sacred space. Maybe ceremonies happened nearby. The rock wall could have been a place where spiritual leaders performed rituals, asking for good harvests or protection from danger. The images may have been part of those ceremonies. Another theory suggests the carvings tell stories, not random art, but scenes from myths passed down by word of mouth. If that's true, the rock face might be like a frozen storybook. But since oral traditions change over time, and since many early native stories were not written down until centuries later, matching carvings to specific stories is difficult. There's also the idea that the site marked territory. In a world without fences or maps, symbols carved into stone could show that a certain group lived there or claimed the land. But the designs at Washington State Park seem more spiritual than territorial. Weather adds another layer to the mystery. Over hundreds of years, rain, wind, heat, and cold have worn down the carvings. Some lines are faint. Details may be gone forever. What we see today might only be part of the original design. Important clues could already be erased by time. And then there's the biggest question of all. Who exactly carved them? We often say Mississippian culture, but that's a broad label. Different groups lived across this region over centuries. Cultures shifted, people moved, alliances changed. Without a signed name or clear record, we can't point to one specific tribe with total certainty. Modern native communities, including tribes with historical ties to Missouri, honor these sites as part of their shared heritage. But connecting them to one exact group from 1,000 years ago is complex. Now let's talk about the present condition of the site. On the positive side, the petroglyph site at Washington State Park is protected. A shelter has been built over the carvings to shield them from direct rain and sunlight. Visitors can walk along a platform and view the rock without touching it. Educational signs explain what researchers believe about the images. That protection is huge. Without it, the carvings might have faded much faster. There is also growing respect for native history. In the past, sites like this were sometimes ignored or even damaged. Today, there's more awareness about preserving cultural heritage. That's a good sign. But there are negatives too. Even with protection, natural erosion continues slowly. Sandstone is soft compared to hard rock. Moisture still seeps in. Temperature changes cause tiny cracks. Over decades, details fade. Human impact is another issue. Even small acts like touching the carvings can wear them down. That's why barriers are important. Another problem is that we may never fully solve their meaning. Unless a new discovery connects symbols directly to a clear oral tradition, parts of this story might stay locked in stone forever. And honestly, that's what makes it powerful. When you stand in front of those carvings, you feel something. Not fear, not confusion, but connection. Someone stood there centuries ago, hammering and carving into rock with stone tools. They had a reason, a belief, a message. They wanted it to last, and it did. In my opinion, the carvings are likely spiritual in nature. The repeated bird imagery, the human forms, the placement on a rock wall instead of deep inside a hidden cave. It suggests this was a public sacred space, a place meant to be seen. Not random art, not idle scratching, intentional symbols with meaning to the people who made them. I don't think we'll ever have a simple answer like this means exactly this. Human culture is rarely that neat, but maybe that's okay. Not every mystery needs a final sentence. Some are meant to remind us how deep and rich history truly is. I love Mummy. Right now, the site stands quiet inside Washington State Park. It is protected by a shelter and monitored. Visitors come, read the signs, take photos, and move on. The forest still surrounds it. The air still carries the same wind that touched those carvings long ago. Positively, it is preserved, respected, and accessible to the public. Negatively, erosion continues slowly, and full understanding may always remain out of reach. The rock still holds its message. We just haven't fully learned how to read it yet. Missouri's lost mound builder cities. What if I told you that beneath the streets of St. Louis, under parking lots, old neighborhoods, and busy roads, there once stood a skyline of Earth? Not small hills, not natural bumps, but carefully built mounds rising high above the land. centers of power, ceremony, and daily life. Today, most people have no idea that Missouri once held one of the greatest mound-building landscapes in North America. In fact, St. Louis was once known as Mound City, and now almost all of those mounds are gone. That's the mystery of Missouri's lost mound builder cities. Before European settlers arrived, this region was deeply connected to the Mississippian world. Across the river stood Cahokia, a massive city. But Missouri was not just a neighbor. It was part of that living network. Villages, temple mounds, plazas, and homes stretched across the eastern side of the river. When early settlers first described St. Louis in the 1700s and early 1900s, they reported dozens of large mounds. Some were small burial mounds. Others were massive platform mounds, flat on top, likely used for temples or leadership buildings. One of the most famous was Big Mound. It stood near present-day downtown St. Louis and rose about 30 feet high. Imagine seeing that in the middle of what would later become a major American city. But here's the problem. By the mid-1900s, as St. Louis expanded, those mounds were seen as obstacles. They weren't protected. They weren't studied carefully. They were flattened for roads, railroads, houses, and brickmaking. Dirt from the mounds was even used as fill for construction. Big Mound itself was destroyed in the 1860s. And that's where the mystery deepens. Because once those mounds were gone, so was much of the information they held. Early digging was often careless. People removed artifacts without recording where they were found. Burial sites were disturbed without respect. Important details about how the mounds were built, who was buried there, and what rituals took place may have vanished forever. We know mound-building cultures in this region go back over 1,000 years. These were not random piles of dirt. Building a mound required planning, leadership, and labor. Soil had to be carried in baskets, layer by layer. Some mounds show signs of careful design, different colored soils placed in patterns, stages of expansion over time. That means these cities were organized. They had social structure, leaders, religious systems, trade networks. So what were Missouri's mound cities like at their peak? Archaeologists believe they likely had central plazas for gatherings. Homes made of wood and clay surrounded the main mounds. Cornfields stretched beyond the settlement. People fished the rivers and hunted in nearby forests. Trade items like shells from the Gulf Coast and copper from the Great Lakes moved through these networks. Missouri wasn't empty wilderness. It was live with culture. And then, like Cahokia, many of these mound centers declined around the 1300 and 1400. By the time European explorers reached the region in the 1600, the large Mississippian cities were already gone. Why? That's still debated. Some researchers believe climate change stressed crops. Others point to overuse of land or internal conflict. There's also the idea that political systems broke apart. If a central city like Cahokia weakened, connected towns in Missouri might have slowly dissolved as well. But because so many Missouri mounds were destroyed before careful excavation, we may never have full answers. Think about that for a second. Under parts of modern St. Louis, there may still be buried remains of homes, storage pits, tools, and artifacts. But much has already been lost to construction. The ground was disturbed before archaeology became a serious science. That loss is one of the biggest negative conditions affecting these sites today. Urban development erased physical evidence. Even now, construction projects sometimes uncover fragments, but it's rare to find untouched sections. There are positives too. In recent decades, awareness has grown. Archaeologists now work closely with Native American tribes when remains or artifacts are found. Laws protect burial sites more strictly than in the past. Museums and historical groups are working to tell the story of Missouri's mound builders more honestly. And while many St. Louis mounds are gone, some mound sites in Missouri still survive in rural areas. These places are protected and studied more carefully. They give us clues about what the lost city landscape might have looked like, but it's not perfect. Funding for preservation is limited, urban growth continues, and public knowledge is still low. Many residents of Missouri don't realize they live in what was once one of North America's most complex native regions. There's also the emotional side of this story. For Native communities, these weren't just structures. They were sacred spaces, burial grounds, centers of identity. Their destruction wasn't just physical, it was cultural. Standing in downtown St. Louis today, you see skyscrapers and highways. It's busy, loud, modern. It's hard to imagine tall earth mounds rising between buildings. But 200 years ago, they were still there. In my opinion, the greatest mystery isn't only why these mound cities declined, it's how quickly they were erased from public memory. Entire landscapes of history flattened in a few decades. That tells us something about how the past was valued at the time. I believe Missouri's mound builders were highly organized and deeply spiritual people. The scale of their construction proves strong leadership and shared belief. Their cities likely faded slowly due to environmental and social pressures, not one sudden event. But because so much evidence was destroyed, we are left with gaps that may never be filled. Right now, the present situation is mixed. On the positive side, historical awareness is improving. Archaeological standards are stronger. Some surviving mound sites are protected. Education programs are beginning to highlight Missouri's deep native history. On the negative side, most of St. Louis's original mound complex is permanently gone. Urban development has covered much of the archaeological record. Future discoveries will likely be small and scattered rather than large and complete. So today, Missouri's lost mound builder cities exist mostly in records, maps, and imagination. Beneath modern streets, pieces of that world may still rest quietly. But much of it has already returned to the earth, leaving us with one lasting mystery. How much did we lose before we understood what we had? Emerald Mound's purpose. What if one of Missouri's largest ancient earthworks was not just a pile of dirt, but a stage for power, ceremony, and control? What if it held the key to understanding how people lived, believed, and ruled over 1,000 years ago, and we still aren't completely sure what it was truly for? Let's talk about Emerald Mound. When you first see it, it doesn't look dramatic like a pyramid in Egypt. It's broad, quiet, rising gently from the land. Grass covers it, wind moves across the surface. But don't let the calm fool you. This mound was built by human hands, basket by basket, layer by layer, by a Mississippian culture that shaped much of the Midwest around 1000 to 1400 AD. Building something like this was not simple. It required planning, it required leadership, it required people willing to work together for a shared purpose. And that's where the mystery begins. What was that purpose? Most archaeologists believe Emerald Mound was a platform mound. That means it likely had structures built on top. Maybe a temple, maybe the home of a chief, maybe a council house. But here's the truth. We don't have written records. We don't have clear blueprints. We have soil layers, fragments, and patterns. Some researchers think it was political. In many Mississippian communities, leaders lived on raised platforms. Height meant authority. If you stood on top, you could look down over the plaza and the homes below. That physical height sent a message. This person holds power. If Emerald Mound served that purpose, then it wasn't just dirt. It was a symbol of control, a statement that someone, or a small group, directed the life of the settlement. But there's another strong theory: religion. Mississippian culture was deeply spiritual. They believed in layered worlds, an upper world, a middle world, and an underworld. Mounds may have symbolized sacred mountains connecting those realms. Ceremonies could have taken place on top: offerings, ritual dances, seasonal gatherings tied to farming cycles. Some artifacts found at similar sites include ceremonial objects, carved stone, decorated pottery, symbolic figures. These weren't everyday tools, they were meaningful items. That suggests mounds were not just homes for leaders, but stages for spiritual activity. There's also the idea that Emerald Mound may have had astronomical importance. Some Mississippian sites align with the sun during solstices or equinoxes. If Emerald Mound had similar alignment, it could have helped track seasons, important for farming corn, beans, and squash. But here's the problem. Many mound sites in Missouri were not studied early enough. Some were damaged by farming or construction before careful excavation happened. That limits what we can confirm. Soil layers can tell us when it was built and rebuilt, but they don't always tell us exactly how it was used every single day. And that opens the door to deeper questions. Was it used continuously for centuries? Did its purpose change over time? Was it ever attacked or abandoned suddenly? There are signs in some Mississippian sites of rebuilding. A mound would grow in stages. That could mean each new leader added to it. Or it could mean the structure on top was burned and replaced, either by ritual or conflict. We don't see dramatic evidence of destruction at Emerald Mound, like massive burn layers. That suggests decline may have been gradual rather than violent. Just like other Mississippian centers, it seems activity slowed in the 1300s and 1400s. So what caused that slowdown? Again, we return to familiar pressures: climate shifts, soil exhaustion, flooding, political strain, breakdown of trade networks. Emerald Mound was likely connected to the larger world centered around Cahokia. When that system weakened, smaller centers in Missouri may have followed. Now, let's talk about the site today. On the positive side, Emerald Mound is recognized as an important archaeological location. It has not been completely erased, like many St. Louis mounds were. That alone is significant. The land still rises where ancient builders shaped it. That physical presence matters. There is growing respect for native history. Preservation efforts are stronger than they were a century ago. Archaeologists now approach sites with more care, working with tribal communities when possible. That helps protect what remains. But there are negatives. Natural erosion continues. Rain and wind slowly wear down the mound's shape. Farming in surrounding areas over decades may have affected soil edges. Limited funding means not every site gets full research attention. And because we don't want to disturb sacred ground unnecessarily, large-scale excavation is often avoided. which is respectful, but it also means some questions may remain unanswered. Another challenge is public awareness. Many people living near these ancient earthworks don't realize their importance. Without strong community connection, protection can weaken over time. When I think about Emerald Mound's purpose, I believe it was likely both political and spiritual. In ancient societies, those two things were rarely separate. Leaders often held religious authority. Ceremonies reinforced power. Power reinforced belief. A raised mound would have been the perfect place to show both. I don't think it was built for one simple reason. It was probably the heart of the settlement, where decisions were made, rituals performed, and community identity centered. And maybe that's why it still feels powerful, because even stripped of buildings, even worn down by centuries of weather, it still stands, quiet, elevated, watching. Right now, the present situation of Emerald Mound is stable but delicate. It still exists. It has not been lost to highways or factories. That's a major positive. But like many ancient sites, it faces slow natural erosion and limited resources for deeper study. It is preserved, yet partially silent. Protected, yet not fully understood. And maybe that's the final truth about its purpose. It once stood at the center of a living world, a place of authority, ceremony, and meaning. Today, it stands as a reminder, not just of what we know, but of how much we still don't.